Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unconfirmed, the show that reveals how the marquee names in crypto are reacting to the week's top headlines and gets the inside scoop on what they see on the horizon. I'm your host, Laura Shin, a journalist with over 2 decades of experience. I started covering crypto 5 years ago, and as a senior editor at Forbes, was the first mainstream media reporter to cover cryptocurrency full-time. Unchained and Unconfirmed are now published as videos. If you're not yet subscribed to the Unchained YouTube channel, head to youtube.com/c/Unchained podcast and subscribe today. Crypto.com, the crypto super app that lets you buy, earn, and spend crypto. Earn up to 8.5% per year on your Bitcoin. Download the Crypto.com app now. Block Native is the easiest way to build and trade with mempool data. Hundreds of the top DeFi projects and traders have integrated Block Native's API. Learn why at blocknative.com. For the holidays, today's episode will be an AMA with questions I solicited from Twitter. Next time, if I get my act together in time and I'm not juggling 5 bajillion things at once, I will solicit questions on the show so you can record your questions via audio and send them in. Anyway, here goes. First question comes from Cryptopia Film. How is the book writing going? Great question. Thanks for asking, because this is pretty much what I'm spending most of my time on these days. I have to say that actually it's super fun working on it. I'm in the revision phase. I will be turning my revisions in pretty soon. And I'm kind of working like mad. So I have as much time as possible to make this book the best that it can be. And I really am excited to share it with you all. Brandon Zemp.eth asks, what's your biggest tip to offer aspiring podcasters? I would probably say just don't be afraid to make mistakes and learn on the job. When I first started, I remember one of the early reviewers in, not like a real reviewer, just like a person making a review, wrote that I sounded like a print journalist who had a podcast, and they, gave me some kind of low rating. And I just started laughing because, yes, I am a print journalist who now has a podcast. And I was just like, okay, well, I guess I sound like myself. And then the funny thing is that, so yesterday I recorded an episode with the digital artist Beeple, and, we were chatting before the show, and then I hit the record button, we started the show. And at the end, when I turned the recording off, he was like, whoa, you're so professional. He was like, when you started the intro, it just seemed like you were another person. And I thought, is this like pre-recorded? But I realized it was really you. And I was like, oh, okay. So clearly, I guess I've improved since I started the podcast 4.5 years ago. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make mistakes in the show and learn as you go. One other funny thing is there's this like little checklist of things that I do right before we begin recording with any guest. And sometimes the guests say like, oh, I'm so impressed with your little list or whatever. And I'm always like, oh, you're just listening to a list of all the mistakes that have been made on the show before, which is true. So anyway, okay. Next question from Paul Abovit. What's it like being an independent journalist / content creator? If this is what you aspire to do with your life, it's pretty much like the best thing you could ever imagine doing. I love it. I feel like, I just feel like the luckiest person in the world. So I don't really know what else to say about that other than that, if you find something that you love covering and you can do it on your own, then it's just so rewarding. I mean, you call the shots, you don't have to have a boss, and you get to do all the fun things that you want to do. And I don't know, it's really great. Obviously there are a lot of things that a bigger company will do for you that you need to, hire people to do for you or figure them out yourself or whatever. But that's not the part that I think about when I think about my job. You know what I mean? It's like, I just get that stuff done. It's the best. That's basically the gist. All right. Brent Shuck asks, so this wasn't phrased as a question, but he just kind of gave a topic, which I think is based on some current events, we shall say, happening in Twitter. So not actual events, but just like, people fighting on Twitter, on crypto Twitter. He asked me to expound on further increasing the division of Satoshis as a form of inflation / lack of scarcity. Well, I don't think there's really much to say about this. other than what somebody else already tweeted. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to credit this person because I don't remember who it was, but they were like, oh, if I just slice the pizza up into more slices, then suddenly there's more pizza. Okay, no, that's not how it works, people. Yeah, that's nothing more to say other than that. Okay, Brent also asks, how do you spend your time outside of crypto? So I actually answered this question before in the previous AMA that I did, I think this summer when I went on vacation. I used to be a yoga teacher, and like a big portion of my friends are from that world, the spiritual world. I'm into meditation. So I spend a lot of time on spiritual stuff, like meditation, yoga, wellness, that kind of thing. I love all that stuff. I also just in general love music and dancing, which I also mentioned. In the times of COVID, though, that's not really something people are doing too much of right now. So I've really ended up connecting a lot more with kind of like my spiritual communities. All right, Mika Warcell asked, do you send Bitcoin to North Korea? Okay, Mika, I don't know if you know anything about North Korea, but their internet is like not connected to ours unless, you're like Kim Jong-un. So no, it's really not possible to send Bitcoin to North Korea. There might be people, this would be a question for Alex Gladstein, although he probably wouldn't reveal what the answer was, of the Human Rights Foundation. He's the chief strategy officer there and is well known for talking about Bitcoin. Maybe they're doing something, but yeah, no, that's not something, that like any normal person can do. You would have to basically be, I don't know, bringing flash drives into North Korea and then training people how to use the Bitcoin. And it would probably be like a really difficult effort. Okay, Tegan Klein asks, how can we better incentivize our reporters without pay to play? I don't like seeing the folks that are helping to make crypto mainstream not being brought up with the rest of the ships in the industry. Okay, so first of all, just the way the question is phrased, how can we better incentivize our reporters without pay to play? No real reporter is incentivized with pay to play. Like if anybody is doing pay to play, then they're probably not actually a reporter. In fact, I know of several other crypto shows that do pay to play. And yeah, those people doing those are definitely not journalists. So at the same time, I also do know that there are some publications that at least used to do pay to play that people think of as being crypto media outlets. All I'm going to say about that is, I never really link to those websites, and I don't, anybody who works for me knows, like we, at least from any of my shows, like we would never link to one of those websites. At least if I know that that's what they're doing. I think basically the best way for this to happen is just for reporters to, and media outlets to use the same business models that traditional media has used, which are, what I do with ads. Subscriptions work really well for some of the really big mainstream outlets, like a place like the New York Times. I think their subscription base is the highest it's ever been once they introduced the digital subscriptions. I think some of the other really big media outlets like the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post have seen quite good numbers with their subscriptions. Unfortunately for smaller outlets, subscriptions are really difficult and not super lucrative or even like sustaining. I think, I don't know if you know, but a lot of local journalism pretty much has been decimated with the internet. And it's super unfortunate. I saw this happening in my own hometown. I think advertising, people claim they don't like advertisements, but I think that they don't want to pay for subscriptions. So that's pretty much the best way to do it. And yeah, definitely pay to play is not going to be how true journalism is funded. Okay, oftentimes, this is an additional question from Tegan. Oftentimes mainstream press gets it wrong. How do we help mainstream get the story right? Example, XRP, example, CNBC is still talking about Litecoin. I think there's a couple of things. First of all, people can cultivate relationships with reporters. I've had different people reach out to me to introduce themselves or, to comment on my work or, to say, hey, I can offer this perspective or whatever. So if you feel like there's a reporter that you want to cultivate a relationship with, like that's totally something that is possible, especially if you have the kind of position or stature to do that. Obviously journalists do vet their sources and try to figure out who are the most credible sources. So part of this is, just about becoming an expert and then being able to leverage that in the right way. But the other thing is one thing that I have noticed, and this is kind of a broader tech thing, although, obviously this does percolate into the crypto industry. I think that there is a tendency for entrepreneurs in tech and also in crypto to say that any critical media is, just has the story wrong or is out to get them or whatever. And I do think that, if those people wouldn't take things personally, but would instead kind of look more objectively and say, okay, well, these criticisms are valid. Like, here's how we can respond to this or that. Like, I think that would be more helpful and is just, it's just a better way to have a dialogue with the press rather than to just get defensive and immediately dismiss everything that they put out. All right, so I'm going to answer a few more questions, but first we're going to take a quick pause for the ads. Today's episode is brought to you by Blocknative. Blocknative is the easiest way to build and trade with mempool data. Hundreds of the top DeFi projects and traders have integrated Blocknative's API. They even have Mempool Explorer, the industry's first no-code environment for working with mempool data. Mempool Explorer truly brings blockchain data to life, letting you watch mainnet transactions as they happen. Through the first quarter of 2021, Unconfirmed listeners get double the transaction volume on all Blocknative commercial plans, as much as $25,000 in value. Visit blocknative.com/unconfirmed to get started and claim this offer. Crypto.com, the crypto super app that lets you buy, earn, and spend crypto, all in one place. Earn up to 8.5% per year on your BTC. Download the Crypto.com app now to see the interest rates you could be earning on BTC and more than 20 other coins. Once in the app, you can apply for the Crypto.com Metal Card, which pays you up to 8% cash back instantly. Reserve yours now in the Crypto.com app. All right, back to my AMA. Coco Crypto asks, as one of my favorite crypto journalists, are you a Bitcoin maximalist? And what's in your portfolio? And give the percent breakdown. So, no, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm not any kind of maximalist. As a journalist, I try to actually have as few opinions as possible, frankly, because I don't want to miss a story. And so I don't want to get too fixed in my thinking about anything. I want to be able to see the stories as they're happening and to be open-minded that anything could change at any moment. And so, yeah, so that's why people actually ask my opinion on a lot of things all the time. And the truth is I really have much fewer opinions than I think a lot of people would expect. As for the part about what's in your portfolio, it's just nothing fancy or special. It's definitely not crypto. And this actually leads to the next few questions. Mark Nuyens asked, you once mentioned you don't own any cryptocurrencies. Is that still the case? If so, why not? And someone else also asked, Thomas83 UK asked, do you still own no BTC? Right. So, and somebody else also asked, yeah, so I don't, and I'm sorry, I didn't explain that earlier. I thought people knew about this. I did own BTC when I worked at Forbes. Forbes has a policy that if you cover something that you own, then you just have to disclose it. Once I quit, I actually have only ever written two freelance articles since quitting Forbes, but they were for the New York Times. The New York Times does not have that policy. Their policy is you can't own something that you disclose. So at that time, I did sell, give away, and donate some of the Bitcoin, or all the Bitcoin that I'd owned. And I think I owned a little bit of Ether as well. So at the moment, actually, though, for reporting purposes, I do own a little bit of Ether because I needed to bid on one of those .eth names or something. Anyway, I know that there's some remaining after that, but I don't remember how much it is. It's probably like, I actually I have no idea. Anyway, so yeah, but that was just, for work, basically for work purposes. Okay. Kathleen Brightman of Tezos asks, in the next 5 years, if it grows more mainstream, do you think Bitcoin culture is going to lose its weirdness? And then, for example, she wrote the vernacular, the cult worship, etc. The truth is, I hope not. I would say that most likely it will just be the same mix of weirdness that it's always been, because I actually think from early on, it's been kind of like, the cypherpunks, and then you've got kind of the Silicon Valley entrepreneur types, and then you have, the libertarian people, and then, you've got all these billionaires who just want to make more money. I don't know. It's really just a really fun mix of people. And so I actually think it's just going to continue to include more of all of these different types of groups. And yeah, like I said, I really hope it doesn't lose its weirdness. Rodriguez asks, in your opinion, will public blockchains ever disintermediate banks, or is banking's grip on governments just too strong? Are private blockchains just more expensive centralized databases, or will they predominate in fintech? Okay, so this question about whether public blockchains will disintermediate banks is super interesting to me. So, gut response is, of course, it's going to disintermediate banks, right? Just because it's sort of like, just everything in crypto always takes off so fast when it happens. And the technology itself is just so much faster than, what you can do with the banking system. And so just by sheer virtue of the vast improvement that the technology represents over existing banking infrastructure, like that alone just makes you feel like, of course. However, the reason why I wouldn't give that as my answer is not necessarily the way you described it as banking's grip on governments, but I would just say that compared to the way that the internet so easily disrupted media, I would say that when you're dealing with money, obviously regulation is going to play a bigger role. And I think it already has and will actually continue to play a bigger role, which I think we're starting to see. By the time this episode comes out, there should be some word on regulation that's coming down. Unfortunately, at the time of recording, I don't know what that is, but I think we're already starting to see that regulation is going to take a bigger role in shaping how much blockchain technology can disrupt and disintermediate banks. One other thing I would say, though, is I think something that's interesting is kind of what I was saying before about how the internet really decimated local journalism, but has helped some of the really big media companies grow bigger. Something similar might happen in this situation where the banks that are big enough to use to institute the technology in such a way that they can compete with public blockchains, they might just sort of retain their foothold that way. Whereas we might see that smaller financial players that can't compete against public blockchains might have a harder time, something like that. I'm not really sure, but it's just something that I was thinking about. However, on the flip side, I think you're all probably well aware that there is a trend of journalists, kind of like me, going independent and being able to sustain themselves as their own little publications. There's this whole trend of journalists moving over to Substack. And actually, there was a big article on that trend that I meant to read, but I've been so busy writing my book, I haven't read it yet. I just know that there are people that are doing this. I think Camilla Russo is one of them because I subscribe to her newsletter. Yeah, I do think that even if we do see that happen, where we might see small banks get disrupted in a way that the bigger banks aren't, that we will also see, and we're already starting to see it, that this technology can also kind of elevate people that, maybe wouldn't traditionally have the right connections or background to, or resources to play or work in the traditional financial system, who get a chance with crypto because it's just a different beast and the barrier of entry is quite different. And I think, for people with the right technical chops, that they can really take advantage of this in a way that maybe wouldn't have been possible before. And as for private blockchains predominating in fintech, yeah, I don't really see that happening. There might be specific use cases by which they do predominate, but I don't see that happening just, across the population at large. And for 2021, what black swans do you see on the horizon? That's a good question. I'm assuming you mean for crypto. Well, that's interesting because, yeah, I think the regulatory thing is going to be not as bad as it was rumored to be not that long ago. So you guys, the industry seems to have escaped something there, which is good. But that probably could have really put a damper on things. I think the only thing would be in the summer of 2020, obviously we did see DeFi kind of have its moment with yield farming and people getting really excited about that. And it did kind of take off very quickly and then sort of died down. And I could see that happening again in a much bigger way at some point in the future once certain issues are resolved, like around scaling or UI or, whatever it might be. But the thing is that, as we all know, there were so many security issues in DeFi, and there continue to be to this day. I literally read about a new one last night involving some place called Warp or something like that. So this is, it's something that has to be resolved. And so I could see that maybe if DeFi does have another yield farming moment that, again, is much bigger than it was last summer, but there's some massive security issue, then that would not be good for the space. Ollie Chan asks, what trends do you see for 2021? The trends I see for 2021, I think, so to my mind, number one story, I think for 21 is probably going to be, okay, no, I'm not going to make a prediction. Okay, these are my contenders for what I think will be the number one story for 2021. The number one I think it will probably be Bitcoin. And it's funny because last summer I was thinking it would probably be DeFi because I thought it might play out the way that things had played out in 2017, where the ICO craze sort of led and then that kind of created this rally, and then Bitcoin got kind of carried along with the crypto craze led by the ICO craze. But actually now, I think with the pandemic and with what we're seeing with all these different corporations adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets, and with PayPal adopting it and it, just becoming so much more mainstream, and finally all these billionaires and investment banks being like, oh yeah, actually we think it has value and here's what the value should be, and et cetera, et cetera. I actually could see it being Bitcoin. In fact, that's my probably top contender for what I think will be the biggest story for 2021. This was actually part of the reason why I did the Bitcoin Now series, which isn't even finished because I'll probably just continue it throughout 2021 because I think Bitcoin will be a huge story in 2021. However, okay, so second contender for top story could still be DeFi if it takes off in a bigger way. That's just a bigger question mark because of the scaling issues, et cetera. But and I just think you would probably need more people to be kind of onboarded into the crypto space and to be able to use MetaMask and all that. There are certain things that yield farming requires you to do from a technical perspective that, even I can't do. And I think about this stuff all day long. So that's probably second contender. Definitely up there is going to be the Coinbase IPO. So my current bet is that the top story for 2021 will be Bitcoin. The second biggest story will be Coinbase IPO. The third, maybe DeFi if anything takes off with that. Oh, shoot. Okay. Also in the top three has to be regulation. Because of what I was just talking about, I think there are a number of issues, starting with, I don't know if you guys listened to the travel rule episode that I did on Unchained this summer, but that really, I think, kicked off this whole thing now that we're seeing where wallets are being targeted by regulation in a way that strikes a lot of people in the industry as being overreaching and impracticable. So, this has not really played out fully in all these different jurisdictions. We're starting to see it take place in a few of them, but, literally right at this moment, I think today, the day that I'm recording this AMA, we're going to find out what that's going to look like in the US. So that will be another big story to watch for 2021. So those are my trends. And all right, you guys, I think this episode comes out, if I am correct, on Christmas Day itself. So that will be it for this AMA. I do have a bunch of questions, which I will cover for next week's AMA. But thank you so much for tuning in. There won't be any news recap this week as I and the rest of my staff are off for the break. And don't forget, we're now on YouTube. Subscribe to the Unchained YouTube channel today. And Unconfirmed is produced by me, Laura Shin, with help from Anthony Yoon, Daniel Nuss, Bossy Baker, Shashank, Josh Durham, and the team at CLK Transcription. Thanks for listening.